Gyi Tsakalakis, welcome to Legally Contented. Please introduce yourself to our audience.
Hi, Wayne. So great to be here. As you mentioned, I'm Gyi, and looking forward to chatting with you today.
Well, now, Gyi, I asked you to introduce yourself.
I
So
just did.
can you give me, okay. So tell me a little bit more about you and what you do so our audience, our viewers, our listeners know just how much authority you bring to every sentence that you state.
Oh boy. I guess I'll go back to. I started out actually studying computer science in the late '90s. I thought I was going to be a computer science major, but that wasn't as exciting. This is pre-Java and no social media, and so I was like, I don't really want to do this. And so I went to the most practical major of all time and became a philosophy major. Unfortunately, because I decided I didn't want to do academic pursuits and I wasn't going to be an author, not a huge market for philosophers. And so I went to law school and became an attorney. And I practiced law for a very brief time, maybe a couple of years, at a small plaintiffs firm in Southeast Michigan. And so I had aspired to be a trial lawyer. And then as the story goes, they were like, hey, can you go out and learn about what we should be doing for marketing the firm on the internet? Came back and talked to a lot of lawyers, and a lot of lawyers that I talked to, this is 2005, 6, 7, said, you know what, I don't really think that people are going to use the internet to hire lawyers like us. And so I was like, that just can't be right. And so we founded AttorneySync in 2008, and we've been helping lawyers navigate this wild world of the web since then.
Now that's an introduction. That's
That's what
I'm
you're looking
talking
for?
about.
Okay.
That's what I'm looking for.
All right.
Gyi, I appreciate you taking the time to chat with me. You and I go back. I think I appeared on one of AttorneySync's podcasts years, and I know I did years and years ago, 2018, 2019, off the check, but known each other ever since. I think you are one of the most credible and authoritative people out there on legal marketing, on digital marketing, because you're not trying to sell anything, even though you co-founded a digital marketing firm. You're not trying to sell anything. And I get the sense that you play in both the business to consumer world, the PI attorneys or criminal law attorneys, but you also have a sense of the B2B world, the larger law firms that are going into and trying to sell to large corporations. So I appreciate you coming on here because I'm going to pelt you with questions. I have questions that I've been thinking of. I have questions I've been getting from clients about legal marketing and digital marketing, both as this is being recorded in 2023, but also looking forward, because it seems just as attorneys get a grasp of a trend in marketing, there is another trend that might be overhyped, but another trend comes in and they go, well, maybe we should be thinking about the metaverse, or maybe we should be thinking about AI. And now the meat and potatoes work they may have been doing for the past couple of years, they put that aside to chase shiny objects, and now they are over budget and perhaps underperforming because they strayed from the goal. So I have a bunch of questions for you, but you mentioned, before we get started, you mentioned your philosophy major. I know that you are a Stoic. Can you talk a little bit about Stoicism? I feel like that has been something that we're seeing more of in recent years, or at least thanks to Ryan Holiday, we're seeing more publicity about it and more books written about it. But what is that philosophy, and how do you apply that to your everyday life?
Well, yeah, I am a humble student of Stoicism, but I will say this: for me, it's a really a practical framework for a lot of the anecdotal kind of values that at least I have. So you take for example memento mori, right? Remember death, but the idea here is that we're so far at least aren't promised to live forever, and so we should be grateful for every day. And so it's those kind of like axioms but practically applied to your daily life that I find so valuable. Amor fati, love your journey, premeditatio malorum, prepare for the worst, hope for the best. It's funny because you mentioned Ryan Holiday, who's certainly brought it back mainstream, but so much of it's already kind of embedded in some of our just basic kind of like thinking that we don't even think about it as stoicism. But anyway, I could rant about this forever, but it really, for me, it really helps. It's given me a lot of perspective. It reminds me to focus on gratitude and really how man, great. If I could say one thing alone, have daily reflections on gratitude alone for me game changer.
How so?
It's a mindset shift because, we're head down, we're doing work, we're raising families, we got all this stuff going on. And just sitting, like, even at dinner, like we try to have, we go around the table, and we're not perfect about it. I think that's another thing that's important about stoicism too, is like, don't beat yourself up if you're not the perfect stoic. But, um, just reflecting on like, hey, I'm just so grateful to be able to sit here and whatever it is, or something that happened during your day. And just the act of like reflecting on that, I don't know, maybe it's doing something to my brain, but it's a mindset shift that, for me, it's like a happiness spell.
It's interesting you say that. I've always gotten the impression, and again, you're more advanced than I am. I am just the Joe Q public who's walking by it and flipping through a book at Barnes & Noble. But I've always gotten the sense that in a way, it's about reducing the impact that your emotions have on your decision-making and your outlook of life, and kind of taking life for what it is and understanding that certain things will happen. And you have to deal with it no matter what the cause was, no matter how you feel, but you will be more successful and a more complete person if you sidestep those emotions that are tangled in with events that affect you and simply move forward based on kind of the objective nature of what's happening.
Yeah, I want to just totally disagree with that framing. But I don't. A lot of people, I think, misunderstand that it's about like emotion suppression, and at least for me, it's really not. I think you articulated it well. It's an acceptance that we have emotions. But like, I think about the one in terms of like worry. Like, worry is a great example of this. Like, and we all kind of know, like, does worrying do anything constructive? Does it help you in any way? Like, not that I can think of. And so, at least in the context of like the emotion of worry, it's a refiltering of saying, look, I have this worry, but instead of like letting the worry consume me, maybe I think about this through like, hoping for the best outcome, but also not being naive about it and preparing for that outcome. And again, that's just one maxim, but I think in that context, um, it's not so much suppression. It's more, and you said this yourself, but it's more about the acceptance, the acknowledgement, and there's something cathartic about that.
Almost like compartmentalizing how I feel. I know I'm upset, but knowing that feeling is not going to help me objectively approach the problem, I need to be aware of it, but not let it kind of blind me as I proceed forward.
Don't go online and respond to negative reviews when you're upset. That's the message.
Just wait until you calm down and then disclose confidential information. And that's how you'll resolve it, right?
Perfect. Done. I think we're done here.
Yeah. That's a beautiful segue to the substance of this conversation. As I said, I've got questions for you, and I want to hear your thoughts on various kind of items that people are wrestling with or thinking about when it comes to digital marketing these days in the legal world. And I guess the first question is, given all of the social media channels out there, given the blogs and the podcasts, what are you defining these days as good content? What is the kind of content that you recommend your law firm clients and the individual lawyers to be creating as a way to get out there and attract business and build their firms?
So I always think of good content as content that achieves an intentional objective. Now that begs the question, well, what kind of objectives might you have? But I think that so much of what people are publishing is just kind of like, spray and pray. They're not actually thinking like, what am I trying to do with this content? Like, is it just a purely awareness? Like, am I just trying to show up in somebody else's feed so that I'm top of mind? This is something we talk about a lot on Lunch Hour Legal Marketing, which is there's a big difference between awareness and affinity, right? So awareness is just like people know who you are. It's necessary, but not sufficient, right? Because if you post something, someone can unfollow you, they can block you, they can, hide you from their feed. Affinity is like they actually like what they're getting. And so in the at least in the objective of like publishing content that your audience wants to consume, good content achieves that objective. And how do you tell? Well, people are engaging with it, they're liking it, they're commenting on it, they're sharing it. And it's not always, that's another thing too, that it's a big misnomer. My friend Ken Levinson in Chicago, he does a lot of he likes to go out to eat for work stuff. And so he takes videos and does the food thing and posts it on social media. And people will say, oh, well, are those videos getting like, are they going viral? Are they getting millions of likes? No. But you know what is happening? Every time he goes out somewhere, someone's like, hey, Ken, I saw that video of you eating at this spot. Or like, Ken, how do you stay so skinny when you're eating veal Parmesan all the time? And so that kind of like top of mind awareness and affinity, because people are also interested. Hey, Ken, where's your favorite place to eat in Chicago? You seem to be like a Chicago food expert. That I would say is good content. But there's a lot of different objectives. So some content can be designed to demonstrate expertise, right? So like, are you the person that knows this, whether it's a substantive area of law or maybe there's something about how you practice that's unique? And so positioning, marketing people talk about positioning, but like how you're going to stand out. Content that's designed to do that achieves that objective, I think is really good. And then there's, the more what we would call, marketing people would call like direct response content. That'd be, maybe that's publishing something that gets sucked up by a search engine that supplies some searcher's intent of an audience member who might actually contact and hire you. And so anyway, that was a very ranty way of saying there's all different ways that I kind of look at content, but it's all through what's the goal? Like, what are you trying to do? Are you trying to position yourself? You're trying to build affinity? You're trying to sell? Or are you just, trying to share pictures of cats because that's what people like?
I've got so many follow-up questions to that rant, so thank you. One point you made about the affinity versus awareness, I think that is particularly true or particularly a conflicted issue when it comes to referral marketing. Now, I get on my soapbox and I say that I think referral marketing is criminally underutilized and underappreciated by lawyers of all practice areas, of all firm sizes. It doesn't matter if you are a traumatic brain injury attorney or you are an FDA regulatory attorney. You need referrals and you want referrals and they're fantastic. But so many attorneys just say, well, they happen. Like, what can I do? They just happen. And that awareness versus affinity is perfect for referral marketing because so many law firms just want to post that they got X number of dollars in a verdict, which may not stand, and they settle for less, but that's a different story, or they settle for X amount of money. And they always talk about, and this is on the personal injury direct-to-consumer side, it's always numbers, numbers, numbers. And I try to nudge my clients. I'm curious if you nudge your clients similarly. I try to nudge my clients, hey, let's not always lead with the numbers. Why don't we talk about how you got this number that in of itself is a great number, not the highest they'll ever see, but tell them that you were able to overcome a really great expert witness the other side put on, or tell them the fact that your client wasn't a great witness for some reason. And while maintaining confidentiality, you can, I think, tell a story about the victory that demonstrates that you are the attorney to come to when that attorney, the referring attorney, has a kind of similar case that might look like just a normal fender bender, but it's actually a huge crash worthiness case with a defective steering wheel or defective brake pedal. I try to push the clients that way because they're going to lose. They're never going to have as high numbers as like the big dog in town. But what they can do is explain, well, how we got this number could transform what looks like a small case that you, the referring attorney, have into a much larger result because we're able to apply our thinking, our strategy, and our smarts to that. So what do you think about that in terms of referral marketing and what your clients are trying to do with their own referrals?
So the first thing is I completely agree with you that failing to nurture referrals is a huge blind spot for so many lawyers. And when you first said referrals, I was thinking about it in a variety of different contexts even there, because it's attorney referrals, it's non-attorney professional referrals, it's former clients referring to you. And so to your point though, and this is the kind of the blanket here for me is you got to think about why they would refer to you. Right. And so some people, to your point, you tell those stories that you're talking about, they're going to, if an attorney hears that story, they might make that referral because you seem particularly expert at this one specific aspect. And then, if they've got a case that involves that, it's like, oh, you've dealt with this, you've had experience with it, you got a great result from it, this. And so the why is I'm referring because you're going to maximize the value to this client. That's all, if there's fee, PI, there's fees involved too. They're going to maximize my referral fee as well. And so that's the why. In other contexts though, and this is the one that I think gets overlooked so many times, last time I checked, there's more lawyers per capita in the United States than anywhere in the world. There's plenty of lawyers to pick from. There's no shortage of lawyers, right? We know everybody, not everybody, because it's not fair to say. There's plenty of people that don't know any lawyers, but presumably there's a lot of different ways to go out to find a lawyer. And so many times when we do surveys of whether it's client surveys or peer surveys, people just they're like, you're my person who I referred to for this practice area. And it's because they like you. Maybe it's because you have some relationship. Maybe you share, quote unquote affinity and something else. Maybe your kids are both on the same T-ball team or something like that. But that's the part that is frustrating. We work with a lot of lawyers that have been practicing 30, 40 years. I'm truly the best trial lawyer, from their perspective, in town in this practice area. Why aren't I getting more referrals? And it's like, is it because it's an awareness problem? No, you're plastered all over the place. You're on TV. You're spending a lot of money on all these different advertising. People know you, but they're not referring to you because there's somebody else that these people they like better, or they know better, or they trust better for a variety of reasons. And so, what do you do about that? Is like, the only thing you can do is to lean in to who you are. What are you into? Like, what are those things that you actually like to do? And then sharing those things with the world. And I think, back to something you said earlier, which I was going to say, I'm super boring on this shiny object stuff, because at the end of the day, there's two things that matter to all of this business development stuff: your relationships and your reputation. That's it. Everything else is just ways to, I say, marshal the evidence of your relationships and your reputation. Like, that's all it is. You got a new app. That's just a new opportunity to solidify relationships and demonstrate that you have a reputation for great client service, expertise, substantive stuff. But I say that people are like, that's boring. Tell me about the fancy way to add captions to my TikTok videos and go viral. And it's like, that's great too. But even some of these TikTok folks who are getting a lot of awareness, some of them, even though they might be well known, they're not tipping into the affinity area in a way that people who are actually liking and engaging with those TikTok videos are actually thinking, oh, this is the lawyer that I want to hire for this thing. We see that happen a lot too. And again, awareness is necessary. It's just not sufficient. So it's like, you got to focus on be your authentic self, share what it is that you're passionate about. And people that are into that stuff too will gravitate and nurture the real world relationships that you have. Do that both in real life as well as online.
Let's talk about real world relationships. Everybody during COVID flocked, or actually most people flocked to digital marketing, and all of these law firms realized, wow, there's so many things we could do if we just put more content on social media, or we blogged, or we had webinars. Now that we're out of COVID, hopefully, and we're getting back to what seems to be normal, but for, Canadian wildfire smoke in our areas, are you seeing your clients, especially, I guess, on the direct-to-consumer side, embracing community marketing again? Because that, to me, is just like embracing direct mail. Everyone else is emailing. And if you sneak into the USPS pile that comes in every day, you're going to stand out more. And there's no shortage of turkey trots, of school bag giveaways, of bike helmet giveaways that firms can use in small cities and large cities to get publicity, to build awareness, to build relationships with people. So what are you seeing on that end from your clients?
Yeah, I would say that that is a trend. I don't differentiate between that stuff that you just described and the digital. So for me, go to the turkey trot, sponsor a local event, bring your phone along with you and record stuff. Maybe you conduct interviews. Maybe you talk about why you care so much about the turkey trot or whatever that local thing is. Maybe you do things to maybe you do some kind of contest. So like, there's a firm here, we actually talked about this on the podcast too, that did a gas card giveaway. And, Conrad and I, the co-host of the podcast, we were going back and forth about the difference between like the awareness and the affinity. But to me, it's all connected like that. And when we were early on, when we started AttorneySync, we constantly heard this conversation where people would pit like the traditional reputation and relationship marketing stuff against digital. And I kept trying to tell people there's no difference. It's just, these are just tools to communicate that same thing. And so I'm huge. If you serve if you're direct to consumer, I mean, even B2B, because depending on the businesses you're serving, But if there's a local component to what you're doing, if you're serving a local community, you got to lead there. Like you've got to be a person in the community, whether it's hosting your own events, whether it's, recognition in, schools, the local sports, the local nonprofits. And then you just take that stuff online, and that it helps spread the word that that's the stuff that you're into, because you tag those organizations, you tag the people, you do things to incentivize them tagging and commenting and engaging, and then you get the network effect. And that's what social networking really does well, is instead of having to physically talk to every single person and only have, actual word of mouth, now you have all the friction between spreading that has gone away, and it spreads like wildfire across all the social media. Nextdoor, if you're looking for another kind of shiny object to check out, if your community has an active Nextdoor community where you live, get involved there. And again, not selling, just be part of the conversations, talk about the good works you're doing in the community, but make sure you're doing that with some online support too.
Now, this gets into my next question, which is, I feel like attorneys would rather spend 10 to 15 grand on some pay-per-click ads or some marketing expenditure that they could track because they want to make sure they're getting ROI, versus spending, 1,500 or $2,000 to sponsor a Little League baseball team and have their logo on the back of a shirt for 3-4 months of a season. Are you seeing attorneys almost over-index on direct response and ROI to the point where it clouds their judgment? They wouldn't want to do some of the community marketing aspects or community marketing tactics you just mentioned because they can't guarantee that Gyi gets my gas card or Gyi receives a backpack and he then calls my firm within the next 12 months.
Absolutely. The marketers have won. They've convinced everybody that everything is last touch, direct response, attribution, right? I've been guilty of it over the years too. Look, hold your, we always go back to the Wanamaker thing. Like, oh, you can't, half your money is being wasted. You don't know what half, and digital comes in and it's the savior. And don't get me wrong. There are plenty of legal services consumer journeys that do follow that path. It's search, click, call, hire. And that's great when that happens. And you should have attribution. But attribution is very limited. It's very myopic, right? We could go through countless examples, but use another one in the personal injury space. Someone's in a car accident, and a family member starts, getting concerned, being like, "How are we going to pay for hospital bills? How are we going to pay for this lost time off?" And so they start doing research. They come across an ad, and they click on an ad, and then they get, and so they're like, "Oh," they write the attorney's name down from the ad because there's something compelling on the page, but they don't call. And then later on, they tell the another family member, like, "Hey, I did some research. This lawyer seems like they're the person that really knows this stuff well." And then so they look at the piece of paper and they call that phone number. Well, guess what? There's all sorts of examples where the attribution totally breaks down. And so we talk a lot about both quantitative and qualitative attribution. And so even though I don't, there could be a whole conversation about this, but making sure that trying to understand how people are hearing about you through your intake process, whether it's as simple as creating it as a question on your intake form. It's not always, people try to make everything so formulaic, and so they ask at the wrong time and it's off-putting, and I get all that. There's some nuance to it. There's some art to it. But getting that qualitative information, leaving another example is leaving open text fields in your web forms so that people can explain to you, because they might not know. They might say, I saw your TV ad, or internet. But the qualitative aspects to attribution are super, super valuable, at least directionally. And you'll be, I think to your point, you'll see a lot of times you're attributing a potential client or a consultation to one channel, but actually the original source was something totally different, and vice versa. And so, yes, you should definitely take your attribution systems with a grain of salt. Don't throw them out the window, but just recognize that they're very limited and they're only showing you part of the picture.
Moving on to a topic that is tied inextricably to attribution, SEO. If Gyi and Wayne leave their law firm and decide to branch out on their own and create a new law firm and say, you know what, we've got to go in and we've got to do SEO. It's the only way we're going to be able to get some new clients in, wink, wink, when we first start our firm, forget about referrals. Where are we at in the SEO game? Are there still opportunities for firms to come in without having to back up the Brinks truck to Google's headquarters and make a name for themselves in the SEO world?
Great question. And so the starting point is that all of your business development efforts should be diversified. So I get into it with lawyers all the time where it's like, we'll talk about like, what's your marketing budget? And your marketing budget should not be dedicated to any one particular thing. If anything, if you're actually gonna be like, no, Gyi, we're gonna do one thing, then I'd be much more invest in those relationships and referrals than I would any kind of what we might call some acquisition strategy, non-brand acquisition strategy. Okay, that being said, to be more responsive to your question, if you're in a major market and you're in a major one of the primary direct-to-consumer practice areas and you're starting out brand new, unless you find a way to get some amazing digital PR, like you got a high profile case that's generating a bunch of links from news or something like that, you have an uphill long-term game to play. Now, I will remind people, I talk about this all the time, and Google still stands by this number. Every single day, 15% of the searches that go entered into Google are brand new. They've never been entered before. And so what happens is, talking about the Brinks truck, everybody backs the Brinks truck up to rank for these lower funnel city plus practice area plus lawyer searches. So everybody thinks that all people are searching for are Chicago personal injury lawyer and New York divorce lawyer and yada, yada, yada. And don't get me wrong, those, when you rank for those and you put a tracking number on your Google business profile and you have a lot of positive reviews, your phone will ring. There are a lot of people that are searching like that. But it's, as you mentioned, you add back the Brinks truck up. It can be very competitive and very expensive. Alternatively, though, the overwhelming majority of searches in Google, remember, in addition to being just an ad machine, Google is a research machine. And so, people have questions. They go to Google. So and this is the thing that lawyers don't get. A lot of people that are going to become clients of yours, they're not even at the stage that they know that they need a lawyer yet. They got a question. And so those types of searches, SEO is great for, right? The marketing people call it the long tail, right? So like these longer search queries, and I don't know how much we're going to get into AI and search generative experience, but one of the things that Google's doing, at least they're alluding to that they're going to do this, is they're going to shape the search journey a lot more with this idea of conversational search, meaning that it's not about a single keyword. It's not ranking for like, how do I sue my employer? It's all of the searches that relate to that and how you're showing up and demonstrating your expertise to persuade those people to contact you. So I'm not, a lot of people talk about, well, SEO, it's too, Conrad and I debate about this all the time. SEO is too expensive. It's not really worth investing in. I don't agree with that. I think that there's lots of opportunities still. It's the devil's in the details. Like if you're going after lower funnel, super competitive queries, like, yeah, it's going to be expensive and it's going to take time, but there is still a lot of blue ocean up there. In fact, there's, 15% every day are brand new. Nobody's, tried to, quote unquote, optimize for those things. And so it should be part of the mix, in my opinion.
That statistic boggles my mind.
Me
That's
too.
one of those statistics that you go, what are people possibly searching? And then you go, actually, I don't want to know, because if it hasn't been searched before, there might be a very good reason why no human has thought to put fingers to keyboard buttons and enter into a search engine that exact question, that exact topic. Let's get into AI, because we could spend the entire conversation about it. And I don't want to do that because you can get AI hot takes everywhere, including your grandparents. But I want to hear your perspective on how AI changes the importance of authorship in this new world. And my thinking behind that question is, currently when I go search Google or Bing or something else, and I get a list of possible links to click on, I can make a determination based on my understanding of a law firm or any company's brand in my brain, what I understand of them in terms of their intelligence, their knowledge. I can say, well, gee, the number one result, I don't know them, but I know number two and I trust them, and I'm going to go to that website. If AI does not include citations, I think Bing tends to, I'm not sure Bard does as of right now. If you are not getting citations, you don't know who is answering your questions. Doesn't that in a way make it imperative that law firms really create more content because they want to be the go-to place for all of your questions regarding workers' comp or white collar crime or real estate closings. Because if they don't get you directly to their website, you might not ever get there because Google, through its AI search operations, won't take them there.
So you said something really important in there that a lot of people don't understand, and that is that you're delineating between listings based on the brand, right? Like, so, and that's a whole other thing too, is like, well, what's brand? And the short version to me is it's kind of what you're known for. So whether it's your reputation, whatever it is that they know it's you, right? So it's the reason that you might click on the third result instead of the first result. And so how this ties in is it's much more important that you're telling the machines who you are. So like when you go and write, so a lot of lawyers don't do this. When they go and write something, they omit the byline altogether, or the byline doesn't link back to like a bio page on their site. Same thing on their own website, right? So maybe, and whether they outsource their blogging to somebody else or they are using ChatGPT to populate content, they're not saying, Larry Lawyer wrote this, and Larry Lawyer is this lawyer has been doing it for, all the information that they need to include in the byline. And so what's happening, and remember, there's a big gap between where Google is today and what Google's trying to do. So in Google's own world, the senior engineers at Google would tell you the same thing. They would prefer not to have to rely on things like links and sentiment analysis, but these are the tools that they're limited. And so as their AI gets smarter, it still has a long way to go, but as it gets smarter, they're going to start to be able to tell, oh, this was written by Wayne, and Wayne knows a lot about this particular subject. We're going to serve this up because it's written by Wayne. Now, the challenge in all of this is that, which I think you're alluding to, is like, well, how do we know that Wayne wrote it or ChatGPT wrote it or some combination of both? And there's kind of two different ways to think about this. Short version is that the machines are trying to detect authenticity, but they're not really great at it. And it's an arms race that ultimately where this goes is you can't tell the difference. And so I always tell people are like, well, how should we be using this? And I'm like, well, it's great for ideation. It's great for like question generation. So if things you should be publishing content about, it's great for creating an outline. It's great for some seed content. But the key is that you're becoming, the same thing we talked about relationships and reputation. You're building the quote unquote relationship with Google and building a reputation for expertise on particular subjects. And that includes, covering subjects like you mentioned, answering questions that are relevant to that topic, writing about it. The links of course still matter and all that stuff. But instead of being so hyper focused about like, using ChatGPT to like, spin out 10,000 articles, and there's, the SEO, the folks in the SEO world, they've done this, right? They hook up the API to a WordPress API. They fire 10,000 pages off. It tricks Google for a while. Traffic rolls in, and then Google's figures it out, and they de-index the entire site because they want to keep the trash out of the results. And so, this is all very new. It's still, everybody's still learning from this. But I always tell people, I'm like, if you're looking for it, keep an eye on where Google is, because you said no citations. If you look at the search generative experience, they do show some citations. They do, and it's a lot of, at least in the local searches. So like, we talked about earlier, those lower funnel searches like Chicago personal injury lawyer. It's a lot of the major legal directories. It's a lot of the review sites. And so links still matter to that extent. But what they really want to do is they want to say, who is, for this particular query, which firms really are the best. And it's going to go beyond just the, links and title tags and things like that.
So I've been toying around with a very basic framework for attorneys and law firm marketers who want to use AI in their content creation process. It's 4 kind of pillars of this framework, but I feel like people are all over the place. It's like either all human involvement or all AI involvement. And I'm trying to explain to people through this framework, there's 4 main areas when you talk about kind of normal day in, day out content that a lawyer would write or a law firm marketer would write for their firm. And AI can help with the topic selection. It could help with the substance. It could help actually assemble the language if you so choose it, or it could help with the actual polishing and editing, whether it's SEO optimization, whether it's a Grammarly-like type style and grammar editor. So there's a lot of nuance here, and we won't get into it, but just the idea that AI content is this like monolithic idea. To your point, you could be curious, gee, I want to write a blog post about a certain topic. I can't get a sexy enough hook. And then you tell ChatGPT or tell your AI tool of choice, give me 7 topics regarding XYZ. I am a lawyer at this kind of firm. And maybe it helps you get your juices flowing. And maybe it helps you pull some statistics that you don't want to spend time on Google for. So it's fascinating to me. And when you think about like deep fakes and presidential campaigns, it's just going to be the world. The worst thing possible could be that we do not trust what we see and hear. And that might be coming soon. We've seen one-off examples, whether it's The Weeknd and Drake AI generated rap songs or Tom Cruise deep fakes. A lot of people have seen, but we are now getting to a point where it is real, and you've got AI influencers who are tricking people. So we'll see, but it is a huge deal.
Yeah, I want to be hope for the best, prepare for the worst, to go back to stoicism. But we're in trouble. You can go and search for custom AI avatars. There's one company in mind that it's called Synthesia. Sure. I was on a webinar with a lawyer in Toronto, family law lawyer in Toronto, Russell Alexander, and he hasn't released it to the wild, but he had one created of him. And I got to tell you, we're only, a couple months, in terms of public attention on this, we're only a couple months in, and it's pretty close already to not being able to tell the difference. And I think to me, that seems inevitable. And so, as you mentioned, I think the consequences of that are troubling, to say the least. And I know they're working on technologies on watermarking and stuff like that, but this is the new arms race. And the constructive point, though, is that think about the efficiency that you can create if you have, if the substance is there, you've reviewed the script, it's accurate information that you're sharing. Now, instead of having to do, your short form video content, like, you and I are recording right now, you can have a script in the AI. And if it's seamless, does it really matter? Does it, now you're getting to the Matrix question, right? If I can't tell it's not a steak, do I really care if it's a steak? Ignorance is bliss. But while it's a brave new world, exciting time to be alive.
Synthesia and similar tools also have something like 65 possible languages you can translate your content into automatically, and it'll move your mouth and eyes accordingly to match that translation, which opens up a whole other door of, well, I can actually now micro-target specific ethnic populations in my city that maybe lawyers aren't doing already. These people clearly need assistance because they're human beings and legal issues find them, or they find legal issues. So yeah, a whole other side to that story. On the technology side, though, let's say you and I record this podcast, we go off, and then within 20 minutes, you get a phone call and it's a prospective client. And he goes, Gyi, I would like a metaverse strategy. Do you hang up the phone immediately?
Not immediately, but likely, and the underlying reason there is not that I hold anything against the metaverse. But again, we're back to let's talk about your client development strategy more holistically. Are you putting all your eggs into the metaverse? And then I'm hanging up. Look, are you a firm that's been around a while and you're trying to like incrementally grow market share, and you think that your audience might be, it's gamers and people who are super into metaverse and you want to be there? Then maybe there's something to talk about. But the underlying point is like, it's, I remember the example I always use is the Pokemon Go craze. I mean, we got lawyers that were calling us up and talking about like, hey, can you help us use Pokemon Go to market our law firm? And I'm like, are you serious? And, again, I start, well, how are your clients finding you today? Do you do something in legal that is like really connected to Pokemon Go? Or is it just like Pokemon Go's hot right now and you want to try to catch some of that wave? And more often than not, it's the same thing with all these social media platforms. It's the same thing with blockchain. It's the same thing. I mean, with every technology, and it's not just lawyers, but lawyers, they sure do love a shiny object as good as anybody else does. But there's no secret magic bullet here, there are specific marketing tactics, right? So if you're like the first lawyer to open something on Pokemon Go and you get news attention for that and you get links, great. You're Mitch Jackson. He's super into the metaverse. He's talking about metaverse, the intersection of law and metaverse, and when a journalist needs something on metaverse, they're going to Mitch. Great marketing. Are there a lot of people, like, is Mitch going, and you can ask Mitch this, be curious to hear his thoughts, but are there people that are walking around one of these metaverse conferences and like, oh, hey, Mitch, I got hurt in a car accident the other day. I'm glad I bumped into you here in the metaverse because otherwise I wouldn't have known how to get a car accident lawyer. I'm a little skeptical of that. Now, same thing though. You go back to the affinity stuff. Are there some people that are like, I'm hooked on this metaverse stuff. I'm going to the conferences. I'm in that community. And Mitch is a known lawyer there that they go to as a trusted, sharing the common interest type of thing. Then I think it's really valuable. But in the context I think you're bringing up with me, where it's like, build me a metaverse strategy because it's going to be, revolutionize my practice. Then I'm probably like, hey, here's a couple of links for you to go read and good luck to you.
I will direct you, Gyi, and all of our listeners and viewers to my episode where I interviewed Mitch last year in 2022 about that very topic, the metaverse. And we got into some real interesting applications of how he was using it then to meet with clients, to generate business. On that kind of tech front, I want to talk about social media in two ways. I am not seeing, with the exception of maybe Morgan & Morgan, I am not seeing a ton of law firms out there follow an influencer strategy, execute an influencer strategy. What are your thoughts about that? And are you hearing rumblings from law firms looking to explore that?
Yes, there are, and influencer strategy is broad, so you can rein me in if I'm not going down the path that you were trying to.
I meant it to be broad. Go fishing. Yeah.
So,
go fishing.
there's Law by Mike. He's doing an influencer strategy, in my opinion. Attorney Tom is doing an influencer strategy. And so there are lawyers that are starting to gravitate to it. And this is the thing I tell people too, because when they see those lawyers doing that and they see, oh my gosh, they got 100,000 YouTube followers and 100,000 TikTok, whatever likes or whatever social media vanity metric. There's a couple of things I always tell them to ask themselves. One, is this you? Can you do this? Can you perform the way that they're performing? Because it's a performance. And I'm not talking about all the post production work that goes into those influencer videos, but like the energy, the consistency of it. And again, it's a personality and performance thing. Like, can you do that? And two is, even if if you're good at it, is your audience going to find that as an affinity that's going to position you as someone that they're going to call and trust with their situation? And so direct to consumer, there's probably more effectiveness there in most of the major direct to consumer situations, because watching someone dance and it gets in front of you and you're top of mind and you're the person, use Law by Mike, like they think Mike's the person they see all over their social media feeds. He's a lawyer. I don't even know what kind of law Mike practices, but I'm going to call him up because I know his name. I think it can be effective for that. But you're B2B, or you're servicing a much more sophisticated legal services consumer. I think a lot of time the influencer strategy can be more of a liability than it is an asset in terms of actually positioning yourself as like an expert. It's like, are you the lawyer who's going to do this? Or are you a guy who's dancing on TikTok all day? And so I think those are just some of the things that people need to take in consideration when they're doing that. But certainly in terms of reach and in terms of video as a medium to communicate expertise, really, really effective. Is that influencing? Like, yeah, I mean, to a certain degree, I think anybody who's on there is some influencer. But if you look at the people who are like doing like they've got like they're doing the series, they're doing the dancing, they're doing all the cutaway shots and stuff, like it's hard to pull off. And like, even if you do, is that going to make you more appealing to your audience? Or is it just awareness? That awareness versus affinity thing, I think is so important to keep in mind.
Well, let me flip it around too. When I referred to Morgan & Morgan, I meant law firms hiring influencers as part of their marketing efforts. What are you seeing there? Are you aware of that? Is that something that you see? Is that a trend?
Yes, for sure. And there, I think, again, it's going to vary because, how much of your budget are you going to go to spend on an influencer? Some of these influencers are not cheap. I don't know what Morgan & Morgan spent, but, Morgan, for those that don't know who Morgan and Morgan is, Morgan and Morgan's a big law firm. They have a very diversified strategy. And so in that way, they're kind of capitalizing on the influencers following, and they're able to build the awareness. Now, for them, again, they're at a stage in their growth trajectory for trying to dominate not just a local market, but nationally. They're opening offices, they're partnering with firms all across the country. They got Google business profiles. They've done TV ads. They've done PR campaigns about Tim Tebow. They're spending money on TV and billboards and you name it, they're doing it. Not every law firm is in that situation. For them, influencer marketing probably makes a lot of sense. You're getting in front of an audience that might not have ever heard about you before, and so there's the awareness, and they potentially have the accolades to back it up in terms of everybody knows Morgan and Morgan, and it's a different strategy. If you're to your point earlier, you're the lawyer who's really good at a specific type of circumstance in a truck case, with I don't know. Cooked books or something and that kind of stuff. I don't know how much an influencer there is going to help you. And so, again, I think it's how does it fit into the overall scheme of what our game plan is? And the other thing I will tell people too, because, we love to look at other lawyers and say, look at Morgan and Morgan. They're doing it. It's got to be working. Well, I guarantee you, if you ask the people behind closed doors over there, they've tried a lot of stuff where they're like, yeah, I don't really know if that works so well. And also, they already have they're a well-known brand. I mean, I can tell you, we'll search for non-brand queries in some locations, and Google will suggest Morgan and Morgan as a search, an autocorrect search, because of that brand. And that's a different ballgame. And so that's a ranty way of saying, be careful before you go and copy somebody you think is being successful. Because you might be copying the wrong thing, or you might be copying the right thing, but it was the right thing for them, not the right thing for you.
When a firm like Morgan & Morgan has a $150 million plus annual advertising and marketing budget, they can afford to take some swings that you, with your maybe $50,000 budget or $15,000 budget, you don't want to miss those same fastballs. And I'll say too, the influencer thing and the NIL for college athletes as well is so fascinating to me, because you could imagine you could really niche down if you were an employment discrimination firm and you found some resume counselor influencer or someone who is an influencer regarding interviews for jobs. That's an alignment of what you do and people who are kind of in that same mindset. If you're a PI firm or a workers' comp firm and you want to sponsor an injured collegiate athlete, that's perfect, right? There's a connection there. But if you are a PI attorney and you are sponsoring some influencer who's a model, I'm not sure you're going to have as much of a connection. It might work perfectly, but it's fascinating to me how influencer marketing, it's all over the place in so many other areas of business and of life. But the law firms are getting into it, but it's interesting for a number of reasons. You almost wouldn't associate law firms with that kind of marketing, which is why it makes it very interesting. It's almost like, oh, wow, I didn't realize that law firm is doing that. That could be a bad thing, but could also be a very good thing if you are in an area where not many people are and you are kind of leading the way.
Well, I love the examples that you gave, because if your audience segment is aligned to what the influencer is, what they're influencing on, I think that's a great application. But if it's not, I think, I don't know why I just thought of this. I guess you identify himself as an influencer, but Ronnie Deutsch, he's pounds the beers. I don't know if you've ever seen him on Instagram, but it's remarkable. I talk about a guy. I'm like, I don't know how you're doing this physically, but he pounds beverages of all sorts. And, if you're a divorce lawyer and you're paying Ronnie Deutsch, you might get some awareness. This beer pound brought to you by the law firm of whoever. But is there any reason someone's going to contact you? Again, it's back to that same concept of yes, awareness, it's necessary, but it's not sufficient. And you're going to spend a lot of dollars on awareness. And again, if you're in PI, you talk about it's a slugger's league. So you get $100 million case from it. Everything works then because I can prove I got one case from it. But your transactional practices, your direct to consumer, family law, bankruptcy lawyers, you got to get a lot of bankruptcy clients from that beer pound to make it worth it.
I want to move from influencers on social media to lawyers on social media, because one thing that I can see coming over the horizon is that as a younger generation of attorneys who's familiar with social media, they have no problem whipping out their phone and taking video of themselves doing day in the life type stuff. As more and more attorneys, whether they're direct to consumer type or even B2B type, understand the role of content and social media and building awareness and affinity, there are going to be attorneys who are able to generate business. Again, no matter the size of the firm, no matter the type of practice, who will generate business that's going to piss off the elder partners or the established rainmakers at a firm, because no matter what firm you're at, if you bring in business, you can slowly move up the totem pole away from being a grinder, away from being a minder, and you are now someone who has more political sway. Hopefully, your take home is increased based on the value of the cases you're bringing in. I think it is setting us up for fascinating showdowns, whether it's at your local PI firm or at your huge AmLaw 50 firm, where some cryptocurrency, Bitcoin, fintech associate who's 5 years out of law school has a blog or has some type of social media presence and is getting the attention of general counsel, is getting the attention of executives, and can bring in business that way. I think it is a fascinating, like, final exam hypothetical about how to manage this situation. So I'm curious your thoughts about that, if you think that's possible, if you see it happening, and where law firms could go when they have those kinds of internal political conflicts, because Joe Q associate is now a rainmaker because they're smart enough to embrace content marketing so early on.
Yeah, and I would say trying to stay as much Switzerland here as I can for both sides of the table. You better have these conversations, because once you don't have something in an employment agreement, or you don't have those expectations set or things in a handbook, you're going to get into some really tricky things, because these online personas, they are extremely valuable. We talk about this also in the context of like practitioner pages for Google business profiles, but like, who owns this stuff? Are you doing this? Is this firm IP, or is this your IP? Are you agreeing to your likeness being owned by the firm? But yeah, extremely, extremely powerful. And you're seeing it already, and you're seeing a lot of these. Once these associate lawyers start to figure out that, hey, on the side of the value equation, they don't need you as much. They're leaving and starting their own firms and breaking off because, to your point, it's all about rainmaking. I mean, lawyers hate to hear this, because, they think I'm the expert on this. I've been doing this for 500 years. I went to the best law school and all this stuff. And it doesn't matter, because at the end of the day, the lawyers themselves are pretty much fungible. They're pretty much commoditized. Not true in every practice area, but there's a lot of commoditization going on, and it's the lawyers that are actually able to convince people to hire them. Those are the ones that are always going to have that value. And so I'd be having those conversations today, setting social media policies, making sure it's very clear who owns the intellectual property, and what's permissible and non-permissible use.
Yeah, I find it fascinating. We've gone a bit now, and I would hate to take more of your time. We could talk for another 2 hours. Won't do that for our audience or for your schedule. But as we get you out of here, I'm curious if you can give a particular piece of advice, kind of two-way, bi-directional advice. I'm curious, in your view, what could direct-to-consumer type law firms learn from their big law brethren when it comes to marketing and business development? And what could big law firms learn from those little upstart direct-to-consumer law firms that big law firms tend to look down on because they are not as prestigious as those big law firms?
That's a great question. So something that the B2C folks could learn from B2B is funny, because you'd think this would be inverse, but not my experience. The B2B folks, they get the relationship, call it account-based marketing, account-based selling, right? So, direct to consumer folks, they don't think about it that way. And so the nurturing, right? I can't tell you how many times we'll be doing an intake with a firm, and I'll be like, what are you doing to stay in touch with former clients? Nothing. Why would I do that? Right? B2B, That's all they do. That's all they know. That they're like, I got to stay. I got to go take this person out and take him to dinner, buy him a coffee, and so that's what I would say on that side. And then the thing that B2B could learn from B2C is not everybody is making these decisions the way that you think they are. There are a lot of people who are doing the research. I mean, I will tell you, we've had clients where general counsel for large corporations are literally on Google and YouTube doing research that leads eventually to the formation, switching firms. And Kevin O'Keefe talks about this a lot with the blogging context. I would say this: another Google thing, but Google's got this perspectives filter coming out, and so if I'm B2B, I would be investing in the short form expertise videos online. Get them on YouTube because Google's going to favor YouTube because they own it. Get on Reddit. Be in those conversations because again, the B2B folks, they don't think this world applies to them. They're like, people would never hire a law firm like ours like this. And I can tell you that they are. So I'd get in the content game. I'd get those short form videos out there. I'd be looking at forums, especially industry specific forums that your clients are in, and be there and focus on that expertise. What is it that you do differently? Why should a company switch to your firm? That's what I would share.
It's amazing. Whether it's a 2-person law firm or a 4,000-person law firm, there's so many overlapping fundamentals when it comes to the practice of law, really marketing generally. But in our context here, there's obviously some nuance when you're talking about practice area and size, but it's amazing the overlap of principles, the overlap of fundamentals, and understanding blocking and tackling can get you so far along if you just understand that it's something that has to get done. You might not like it, to your point. You just want to write briefs. You just want to do depositions. But to excel in your career and to actually have autonomy and some control over your life in a very demanding profession, the fundamentals of marketing and business development and now digital marketing, to me, they ring true no matter the size of the firm or the practice area. Gyi, where can people learn more about you? Where can they contact you? Tell them about the podcast, AttorneySync. Go off and plug away, please.
Sure. I'll give you my email. It's gyi@attorneysync.com. You can go to attorneysync.com. That's my attorney marketing business. As Wayne mentioned, Lunch Hour Legal Marketing Podcast if you want to hear more of my rants. Otherwise, I've been spending more time on LinkedIn recently. I used to be all over Twitter, but since now that it's X, I don't know if that's playing a role in my reluctance to be there, but feel free to reach out and connect with me. I love talking to lawyers about marketing stuff and if they have show topics and that kind of stuff. And Wayne, thank you so much for inviting me. This has been a blast. Really enjoyed the conversation and look forward to seeing you soon, hopefully.
Same here. But now I have to ask you, what's the origin story for AttorneySync? That name, AttorneySync. Were you huge NSYNC Backstreet Boys fans?
No. It's horrible. We talk about rebranding all the time, and then we're like, oh, it's too much of a lift to rebrand. But we actually got started because we were going to be a lead generation company, more like Total Attorneys. And so it was like syncing attorneys with clients. And I don't know, folks that remember the Total Attorneys story, you can Google it. But there's a question of whether lawyers could permissibly even pay per lead or whether that was fee sharing. There was a big fight, and ultimately they concluded yes. But that was the origin story. And I'll tell you, my business partner, I joke around all the time because going through the branding exercise, we were so we got to a point where we were so frustrated. We almost decided just to be Blue Cheetah. And so we still joke around today that it's just like how arbitrary. But when you think about that, it doesn't really, truthfully, it doesn't really matter. It's what people think of the brand, right? Like what's Nike and a swoosh? It has value because of what Nike is that we think about. Anyway, that's a story for another day.
Yep. Branding. We talked about legal marketing. We didn't get into branding much. There you go. There's your firm branding lesson for the day. Gyi, thank you so much for your time. I'll be talking to you.
Take care, Wayne. Thank you.